All right, good morning. Today is day 71 of our class. It is Monday, the 24th of April. I am taping, and last week, I think it was about Friday, I'm not sure, I sent this out to everybody, but I want to take a couple minutes to go over it again. I had a couple emails on it this weekend, so I want to make sure people do understand what's expected of you. All right. Technically, I don't know. I know that Evan gave a last assignment for React. I don't think I'm going to. How's that? We are going to go over stuff starting today, but I'm not going to make you responsible for anything. In fact, everything that I do, if you would just as soon watch me do it, that's fine. You're welcome to code along. And I really think there is a benefit to coding along. That said, some people, when they do code along exercises, tend to fall behind and they just don't like doing it. And if that's the case with you, then don't. It's totally fine. All right. Whichever way, like I said, is easier for you. Now, what is due, as it says there, by midnight a week from Thursday? So not this coming Thursday, but the following Thursday. All right. Is your electronic portfolio. Now, when you do your electronic portfolio, there's a lot of different ways that you can do it. We talked about this before. You can build the whole thing in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And in fact, you probably need to put very little JavaScript, if any, into it. The majority would be HTML and CSS, and that's just fine. All right. If you want, you can try doing it using Bootstrap. All right. So it would be basically HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. That would be fine. The other thing is, quite a while ago, I made a video, and it's linked to right here. I'm not going to click on it, but I showed you how to use Mobirise. Mobirise is a drag and drop type of thing that you could create your portfolio in a matter, hour or two. I don't really know. All right. But on that same um, link that you see my cursor on right now, I did about an hour and 20-minute long presentation. This was for you guys earlier this semester when I both showed you how to use Mobirise and how to go and publish your portfolio to GitHub pages. All right. So I want that done, of course, and it has to be done. It has to be done by, like I said, Thursday, May 4th. Now, if you've either already got it done or you're like, geez, it's pretty much done, but I want to make sure he's got it, etc. Send it to me earlier than that. I probably won't be grading it until that evening, but I can look at it, make sure that I have access to it. All right. So publishing it to GitHub pages and providing an invite to me is worth 10% of the grade right there, 15 out of 150 points. All right. Then you've got your choice. What in the past, what some people have done is they've created virtually an electronic portfolio type of website that had 4 or 5 pages on it. Other people had just one page where you could scroll down and do different parts. There should be some kind of a home page, landing page, whatever you want to call it. It can be as ornate, as simplistic, as complex as you want it or need it to be. All right. There should be an About You section. Ideally, in that About You section, there'd be some kind of a picture of you in there. All right. And I know that with a lot of people, I don't like putting my picture out there, to be honest with you, but it's considered more and more important. People, if you use this as a tool to try to get yourself a job, people do want to see what you look like. Whether that's fair or unfair, not for me to say. You should have your resume either directly on this site, or if you want to put a link in there where you can click to it. And in an ideal world, you will provide 2 copies of it, a PDF and a Microsoft Word copy. If you're not aware of this, you probably are, but if you're not, let's just say, well, I don't I've got a Word copy, but I don't have a PDF, for example. You can take any Word file and do a file and you can do a save as. And when you do your save as under your type right here, you can choose PDF. All right. Plus, there are things online that will convert the other way. So, in other words, they will convert from, this is the other one. They will convert from a PDF format to a Word format. All right. And people always ask me questions like, well, what if I don't put a link to my resume? What if I don't have a resume? How much are you going to take off? I don't know. All right. That whole thing is worth 30 points. I don't really know, to be honest with you. You should also create some kind of a simplistic contact form. All right. That really should um, go back to you. The other thing, I've mentioned this kind of thing before, and I'm trying to tie up a few things as we're winding down here. If you don't already have one, you should get yourself a non-Rankin email address. And that's the one you really should use in there. And it should be a professional one. All right. For example, like with me, I'm sure it's not available, but like jpscott@gmail.com would be a good one for me. Something like that. All right. You don't want one that has your favorite hobby in there or what you look like or whatever. You just don't want to do things like that. All right. So again, as I've already mentioned, the portfolio can be built using either what we've learned in this class, that being HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or Bootstrap with HTML and CSS, or Mobirise. All right. I've had several people in the past who have created in the first semester, all right, and used Mobirise, for example, then later rewrote it using Bootstrap or using HTML5 or whatever. All right. Each page must be similar in style. I don't want any one page to have different coloring, different font, etc. There should be a natural flow to it. As it says, it should be aesthetically pleasing. This is something that you should provide a link to this on your actual resume. That's going to give you a leg up over a lot of people who apply for jobs and just send in a resume, because that way they'll be able to look at examples of some of your work. As it says there should be no broken links. You shouldn't have, I mean, that looks really unprofessional to have an image that doesn't show, all right? Or to have, any kind of mistake, whatever it is. As it says, include a professional image and a working contact form, all right? The coursework, now it's going to be different if you've already taken the C# class as opposed to if you have not taken the C# class. All right. So let's start with those people who have not yet taken the C# class. Everything that you've got to put in here, all right, will be examples of your work. So typically what people have done in the past is they will bring up, for example, of a CSS page layout. You bring up something you liked, you'll take a screenshot of it. All right, how do you do that? If you look up on your keyboard, you'll see a print screen key up near the top right corner, all right, or towards the top right corner, and that'll save it as a JPEG or a PNG file. But you'll make it clickable and then have a link to your GitHub repo. Now that means that if you want somebody to be able to see that, all right now it probably is private. You're going to have to make it public in GitHub. How do you do that? You go out to github.com, you bring up the one that you want to make public, and you go to settings. And in settings, if you go way down towards the bottom of your settings screen, there'll be a thing in there that says the current mode is private, and there'll be a button there you can click to make it public. All right. So it's expected you'll have HTML examples, CSS examples, and JavaScript examples. All right. I used to tell people you had to put in this, you had to put in that. But the problem was that sometimes people didn't finish something or they didn't like the way something looked, etc. So there should be at least 6 things on here. 3 with one of each of these and 3 of these. All right. If you have already taken the C# class, meaning that this is your second class, you should also provide 3 or more C# program examples in the same way. I'm not going to tell people, like I said, I used to tell people what they should put out there. And I think a couple people were put off by that. It's like, hey, I can choose for myself, then do that. That's fine. But you're going to be graded on, did you do this? Did you meet these requirements? This is one time I think that you'll find I am pretty stringent about the requirements. Now, I did grade your chapters 6 through 8, or 6 and 7 JavaScript test yesterday. My goal, and it's a promise, so hold me to this, is by Friday, everything that's due other than your portfolio, everything is going to be graded. So you will know going into the weekend exactly where you stand. Also, you'll know going into the weekend if you have anything that you haven't turned in yet. All right. So that's it on this. And again, it is due no later than midnight. All right. A week from Thursday. So that's the first thing. So let's get out of there. This is a similar one, but it's for my afternoon class that we'll talk about later. All right. So let's see. So as far as today goes, as it says, today we're going to begin the intro to React portion of the class. As we get going into this, you may disagree and say we didn't do much React today. I want to tie up some JavaScript loose ends with you today. We will do React. Please don't worry about it. My plan is I am going to lecture on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week on React. I'll try to keep the lectures to 2 hours each. Friday will be our typical lab period. So you will have 4 hours if you need it to work on any homework that you still have to give me and to work on your electronic portfolio. All right. Now, as it says in the bold there, I will not be cannot accept any work after midnight Friday. All right. Because what I plan on doing is having my grades in ideally, even if I have to stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning. All right. My goal is to have all those grades turned in by Thursday evening. And the reason for that is Friday morning, I've got a meeting with Evan. We've got to go over what are called student outcome assessments, where we have to fill out all these forms. I have to do work ethic grades. And even with that, all that stuff is due. They like it in by 10 a.m. All right. So that's the goal. And after 12 noon, I'm on vacation until Monday, the 15th, when we start. I'm going to be teaching this summer the C# class. So, you know, I won't even be around. So if you don't have anything turned in, it goes into the book as a 0. That's not a threat or anything else. I'm just trying to be honest with people. All right. So with that said, this is what we're going to do. And it's going to sound a little bit goofy, but if you bear with me, all right, most people seem to understand what they were supposed to do when we started and when we worked on the rock, paper, scissors program. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a few other ways that this problem, the rock, paper, scissors problem, could have been solved. All right. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because eventually tomorrow or Wednesday, we're going to write an entire new program, rock, paper, scissors, but we're going to write it in React. So you can start to see the differences between doing something in JavaScript and doing something in React. Also, what you're going to notice is that when we look at the HTML for each one of these examples that I'm going to give you, there's not going to be very much there. All right, that's not a threat. I'm just telling you the truth. There's not going to be very much there at all. All right. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it final R. I'm going to call it JSRPS for JavaScript Rock Paper Scissors. And inside of there, I'm going to create 3 more folders. And I'm going to call them V1, V2, and V3. All right. Each one of them will be similar in some ways. What I mean is this. I'm going to go into V1 right now. In fact, I'm going to do it like this. I'm going to go into V1 right here, and I'm going to come in and immediately I'm going to put a CSS folder, but you know what? I'm not going to put a flaming thing in there because I don't care about how this looks aesthetically. But I am going to put a JS folder in here. And inside of that JS folder, I'm going to put in a file, and that file is going to say rps1.js. All right. Plus, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add an index.html file. All right. So now that I've got that, let me get rid of these other two. And just make copies. I'll have to make a couple changes to these, but that's okay. All right. So I'm going to bring up the first one right now. That is, again, V1. So I'm going to bring that up in code. All right. Again, I'm not going to do any CSS. I'm not concerned with how pretty this does or does not look. All right. Okay. So let's come in here and let's start the way we have always started, and that is with our exclamation point up here with our exclamation point in a tab. And I'm just going to call this rock, paper, scissors, V1. And again, I want to say this one more time, and that is there are people who took the test and somewhat got the rock, paper, scissors stuff correct, but also had problems with it. I'm more concerned right now. I'm more concerned with the logic. All right. And if you say, yeah, but I had problems with the CSS, well, then you should go back and take a look at some of the CSS stuff that we did. But what I'm more concerned with in here is that you have some kind of an idea on how to do the logic with this stuff. All right. And again, some people do, some people don't. Everybody's different. All right. So I'm coming in here and there's nothing in here I'm going to explain. All right. But I'm going to put in about 10 lines. And this is going to get shorter and shorter with each iteration of this that I go through. Get rid of this. All right. Not very much in here right now. If I were to go save this, which I can do, and run it, there it is. Not much. All right. Okay. So I'm going to add my buttons. Right. So if I take a look at that, I've now got that. And down here in just a second, I'm going to put my answer Right now, these don't do anything. You know that. I could go in again, pretty this up, give it a title. We could make all of these the same size. I could write justify these. It doesn't matter. Same kind of thing with the buttons. All right. Width of the buttons, each one is a little different because it's based on the number of letters in there. That's again, totally fine. All right. So finally, just about 2 or 3 more lines here. All right. Well, the only things that'll be added onto that will be the word span or the word totals rather, and then our script tag. All right. Let me double check and make sure that that is in here correctly. Whoops. 1JS. Okay, there's nothing in there, which is fine. All right. So again, right now, if I come in here and I run this, it doesn't look like much. There it is. Okay. So that's what we're going to put in just a second. All right. And the reason that I am doing this, all right, it's not to waste time, my time or yours, but each one of these particular examples that we're going to go through right now will be fairly what's referred to as DOM intensive, document object model. You know what that is. And one thing about using the DOM, the document object model, is by default, which means unless told otherwise, when you make a change to a page, boom, the entire document object model or the entire DOM has to be rewritten. So if you've got a very simple website, that's not a big thing. But if you've got a website with a lot of intricate features, functionalities, images, etc. in it, it can really slow things down. The reason I'm telling you that is when we get into in just a little bit talking about React, React doesn't work directly with the DOM. Instead, React creates something called a virtual DOM. You might say, well, what the heck are you talking about? Well, the difference is what React does is it makes changes the same kind of way we do it, in JavaScript and whatever, but it's making changes to a copy of the DOM. Then it goes and it looks at what has changed from what was in the DOM originally. And rather than rewriting the entire page, it only rewrites the portions of the page that have been changed. And boom, that makes things go a heck of a lot faster. That is one of the reasons that React has achieved the popularity that it has achieved. Now, that said, you can go online and you can find people who will say React is dying, React is dead, React is this. You're always going to find that. But there are millions of sites out there that use it. All right. And one of the reasons that we do this and we are going over this now is that what you're going to find when you take the class this summer, and I was trying to count this in my head before, you're going to meet every day from 8:30 to 2. Those of you who are taking, I think, are fortunate enough to be taking the AWD 1111 class with Evan, is you only have 54 days. You don't have 80 days like we have now. So you're meeting longer each day, but you're meeting for less days. All right. And whether you're taking the class over 54 days or over 80 days, what has happened in the past is we start the class by going over node.js. You've had a little bit of that already, very little, but you've had a little bit of it. Then you learn how to make Node.js work better by using something called Express. All right, which is, I'm going to say, for lack of better words, it's kind of a framework that you use, but I don't even want to get into any of that stuff. Then you start talking about databases. Again, I've always gone through first MySQL with this stuff, and then going into um, what's called a NoSQL or a NoSQL database, which means not only, that's what the no means, not only SQL. That's called MongoDB. So the bottom line is this. Typically, there's only 2 or 3 weeks left at the end of the semester to go over React. All right, after you go over the other stuff. And the reason that's important is there's a boatload of React jobs out there. All right, one of the things we've talked about doing is possibly even changing around what we're doing in the class you're in right now, the AWD1000 class, giving you even less HTML and less CSS and get right into React right away. That may happen. I don't know. I should mention too, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but in a couple days, probably a week from today, you're going to be receiving um, course evaluation, electronic course evaluation. Please fill it out if you get one. If you want to bash the heck out of me, go ahead and do that. If you want to bash the heck out of the books or the course itself, go ahead and do that. But the only way that this course gets better is to try to be able to incorporate the feedback from students who have taken the course. The only way that I get better is if I can incorporate the feedback that you give me. All right. Okay. So I'm going to go jump over here into right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my constants. It's doing that, but it is. All right. You may notice when you look on here, I'm doing this a little bit differently. Okay. I'm doing this a little bit differently than I've done it in the past. Why? Because you see, when people write this stuff, you see it done in a whole bunch of different ways. Now, one thing that we could have done is I could have set up an alias in here like we had done in the past for this. And you see, if I did that, then I could have had dollar, computer choice, dollar, etc., which would have been a little easier to read. But I do want you to realize, and again, many of you, I think, did very well in this JavaScript section, but some people struggled. All right. And I do want you to realize that what we're doing here with these first three things that you see right here is we're saying, um, take these things right here, the computer choice, the user choice, and the result, and give them a value. All right. So these are going to be variables here, here, and here that represent what's here, here, and here. All right. Now the next one, line 4, is different. Notice it's a document.query selector all. All right. And what that is then is it's going to find every button. All right. And why is it doing that? Because the way the game is set up, as soon as you click one of the three buttons, the game ends. And what it's going to do is it's going to say who won. It's going to show what each person chose, who won, and then it's going to have a running counter that's going to have the number of wins the user had, the number of wins the computer had, the number of draws there were. All right. And then I believe we're going to use this basically to fill in all that information that you're going to see on the bottom of your screen. You'll notice too that on any field, any variable in here that is not a numeric variable. In other words, if you look at the lets in lines 6, 7, 8, and 12, you'll notice I didn't even initialize them. Technically, they're equal to undefined. I could have set them equal to the empty string, which is totally fine. It's kind of the way we've been doing things, to be honest with you. All right. All right. So we've got that. So again, we're setting up our constants and we're setting variables. That's all we've done in here so far. Now we want to basically, for lack of better words, we want to play the game. And when we play the game, you already know this. What we want to do is we want to iterate over the buttons. And then what we want to do basically is we want to set the user choice based on them on the button that they clicked. Then after we do that, we're going to figure out the computer's choice. Then after that, we're going to determine the winner. All right. And there's a lot of ways that you can do this. You already know this. All right. And what I'm saying is, again, there are multiple ways of writing this program. I'm going to show you one of them, and then we're going to refine it and refine it again. All right. But so you can start seeing some of the stuff that's going on in here. All right. So that in an attempt for me to, like I said, to use some of the stuff we haven't spent a lot of time on, this is the way the first one is being written. So we've got this thing here that's called button choices. Okay. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to iterate over the button choices to determine which button the user pressed. Okay. Now I'm not going to put a comment up here. I'm hoping that I used good enough names and I don't need to put a comment up here that says constants and one here that says variables. All right. I just want to start by actually going through the code here. All right. So this is how I'm going to iterate over this. I'm going to say button choices. I could try to use a for loop, but I'm going to use a for each. It's going to involve a little less coding. And I'm going to move this down right now. In fact, let me set it up here. Let me do a word wrap. There we go. All right, so what are we doing here? Okay, the same kind of thing that I just mentioned to you. We are iterating, we are iterating over all of those buttons. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out the one button that the user chose. Notice button choices and button choice. We didn't have to call it button choice. You could have called it anything. This, of course, must be called button choices, but typically you do that when you have an array or when you have several variables of the same type as you pluralize them. Then when you go into a loop, you singularize them. So I'm telling it to look through my button choices, but I really only have to add a click event, all right? And I only have to add it to the one that was clicked, all right? So I'm going to say here user choice equals e.target.id. All right, what does that mean? Why it's goofy stuff that's set up in here. Let's do it like this. All right, that user choice is going to be the one that I clicked. That's what it's doing. All right. Now, what I want to do then is down at the bottom, that's going to show the one that I chose, the user choice. All right. So I want to set the user choice dot inner HTML, and I want to set that equal to user choice. So now I've got my user's choice. I do have that. All right. But I don't know yet what the computer chose, and I don't know who won. So I'm going to call two more routines here. The computer chose and determine winner. Okay. So, again, I'm taking for granted and Grant, sorry. I mean, I know you're the only one here, but if something doesn't make sense, you'll ask. I had a long talk with Evan, and I have met several times over the last few days because he has not taught a class that's been totally online before like this. And he, was asking me a few things about it. And I said, I thank God for people like Grant, and then in the afternoon for John and for Clayton, because it's much easier when you've got at least one person listening live. I said, what you lose when you're lecturing to a computer as opposed to to human beings is that human interaction where in his classes right now, Evan can say, does everybody get that? And if they don't, you can tell by looking at their faces, I don't have that luxury. All right. And I said, that's the biggest thing. So, all right. So I'm going to type in here and
I
we're going
actually have
to,
a quick question.
sure.
So it's really about line 17 and I guess a little bit about 16 with the e.target.id. Could you explain
Yes.
a little bit about how we got
Yes.
e? Is that just what you fed in on line 16 with
Okay.
the event listener?
This right here, every time that you add an event listener, all right, you get certain things that you can use but don't have to use. And those things that you use are in an object all by themselves called an event object. That event object that you see right there, we're referring to as E.
Okay.
All right. And one of the things that we get in there is what you just reacted on. That's the target ID. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
so that's taking from I guess the HTML where we set the buttons ID. So it's
It's actually the event itself is what's associated with the JavaScript.
okay.
All right. But what we're doing here is we're taking the action of the JavaScript and we're setting it equal to this, which we have also up here. All right. Basically, what we're doing is we're setting that equal. All right. Or we will be setting it equal, however you want to refer to it. Okay. Up here, we're setting it equal to this. And this is eventually have to be set equal to this, which is the way we're referring to it in the HTML. So
Right. Okay.
to answer your question, yes, but in a roundabout way.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sure. All right. So I'm going to come in here and again, the first thing we have to do, okay, the computer chose, we have to give the computer a choice. Well, you know that. So I'm going to say const rand equal math.floor, and there's plenty of ways to write this. That you can be assured is going to, this right here is going to give you a random number between 0 and 2. You can be sure of that, 100% positive. The floor will say that, any decimal that's in there, just get rid of it. All right. But then we add 1 to it because we don't want random numbers between 0 and 2. We want a random number between 1 and 3. Very similar to the way we did it when we were working with grades and the like. All right. So if rand triple equal 1, well, then we should know that the computer choice was rock. And it's pretty much the way you'd expect. So else if rand triple equal 2, the computer choice is equal to paper. And then finally, all right. And we can do these in a lot of ways. We could just write straight if statements there. But the problem is if I find this, if it was a 1, why should I really have to check to see if it was a 2 or if it was a 3? These are the kind of things as a programmer, all right, that potential employers are going to be looking at in your code. It's like, wow, you wrote some extraneous stuff in here and you're making the computer do a lot more work than it should have to do. That's not a good thing. All right. And I can just do an else in here. The computer choice is equal to scissors. All right. And again, that I would think at least is just going to make sense to everybody. All right. So now, just like I did here, where I set the user choice equal to that, I'm going to copy that line down, but I don't want to set the user choice here. I want to set the computer choice, and that is equal to computer choice. All right. So now I've got those two things done. And when you think about it, there are 9 different possible outcomes. I'm not going to even list them, but there are. All right. And 3 draws, 3 where the user can win, 3 where the computer can win. So again, in our quest to try to make this run and in as good a way as possible, all right, the first thing we're going to do, and again, I'm not saying you have to do it this way, but the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say if the computer choice triple equal the user choice, well, we already know if that's the case, we have a draw. So the result is equal to a draw. All right. And we want to increment our draws just like that. Again, that should make sense to everybody by now. All right. Now, again, we can write this just to show you. I'll write this as a series of ifs. All right. Rather than else ifs. But you could do it technically either way. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say if the computer choice was equal to rock, again, double or single quotes there, doesn't matter. So if that's equal to rock and the user choice is triple equal to paper, well, what do we know? All right, the computer chose rock, the user chose paper, so the user won. Now, just so you know, what we could do in here, what we could do is I could come in here and do this. All right. And there's a reason I'm showing you this. First of all, it's some people would say it's redundant and I'm putting in too many parens. But the other thing I could do here is I've got a whole big thing here. And if I wanted to, I could say, or, and then I couldn't do the next test. In other words, where the computer chose paper and the user chose scissors. All right. So what I'm saying is I could put 3 different checks in here if I wanted to and put an or between them. Or I could do those as separate checks. This is one of those things, okay, I'm going to have more code doing it the way I'm showing it to you, but at least when you're first writing it, it might make more sense that way. All right. So when we go into the next iteration of this, what you're going to see is I'm going to write it another way where it'll be even better than that. Or hopefully you'll think it's better than that. So in this case, the result is equal to user wins. And I want to add 1 to the user wins. All right. And I'm just going to keep doing this. Like I said, though, we could make this as one big check, or we could make this as multiple checks. The order in which you do these, to me, it makes sense to do that one first, because a third of the time it's going to be a draw. All right. And there's only one thing you have to check there, and that is, are they equal to one another? All right. But again, everybody differs in the way they look at these kind of things logically. All right. So I'm going to say otherwise, if the computer choice was equal to, oops, triple equal to rock. All right, whoops. And the user choice is triple equal to scissors. Well, again, you already know this. The result is the computer wins. So we want to add 1 to the computer wins. And like I said, I could go, I notice here I've got rock, rock, all right, and then I'm going to have paper, paper, and then I'm going to have scissors, scissors. Did I have to do it that way? Of course not. I could have done the computer rock. I could have done them in any way I wanted to. This is just the decision that I made, was to do it like this. All right, so if the computer choice is paper, and the user choice is rock, well, I know the computer wins because paper covers rock. Okay. And let me write this again. You will notice, or hopefully you notice too, okay, this is only on one occasion, but this happens 3 different times, so does this. So I'm repeating that code 3 times. I could have written another function that I called from there. Would that have been cleaner? It would have resulted in less code. So yeah, you can make your own determination. I guess you could say, yeah, it would have been cleaner. All right, I'm going to grab this one. Just copy the whole thing down here. So starting in line 69, but these will become scissors. I guess I did it backwards. I should have done that. There should be a paren there and there. Again, I know I'm going a little nuts so with the parens. There's no reason that we had to put this many in there. All right. It does, in my opinion, it makes it a little easier to read. With many people, they're like, no, you just made it harder to read. Okay. And I understand both points of view. I really do. All right. It's whatever you feel. Okay. I've always said this, and you probably have heard me say it this semester as well, and that is that when you're first learning to do this stuff, you should be programming for understandability, your understandability. All right. So we've got our draws, rock, rock, rock with paper, rock with scissors, paper, paper, paper with rock, paper with scissors, 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 scissors with rock, scissors with paper. Okay. And I'm looking here. What doesn't it like? Unterminated string literal. Well, I'm about right there. All right. I don't think I have any errors in here right now, except I have to close that. There we go. All right. It looks like there is something here it still doesn't like. It's telling me a curly is expected. So that's on that if right here. Okay. We move these over. All right. So those are all my choices. I'm not going to go over those because I think at least we've done this enough times. All right. That should make sense to people. All right. Now remember, this is called determine winner, right? So we came in here and we had determine winner, and we've done that. But the only thing we haven't done yet is we haven't printed out the results. In other words, the totals for people. Okay. We've been figuring out adding to user wins or adding to computer wins or adding to draws. We've been doing that, but we haven't been putting it any place. And we're going to do that now, and then we're done with this one. So I'm going to say totals plus equal user wins, and then I'm going to add to that user wins. All right. And then I'm going to add to that just a blank line. Then I'm going to do it again. And this will be computer wins. With a blank line. And again, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to just line stuff up. Okay. And then finally draws. Which one do you put first? Well, you're the one playing. So I ended up putting first, I ended up putting in the user wins. All right. Then finally, we want to say the result dot inner HTML equal result, and the totals dot inner HTML, oops, equal totals. Now, before I'll spend a minute and go back over this. Let's see if I made any mistakes or not. I mean, it's me. So, all right. Well, I've got it undefined here, so I'll have to fix that, but that's no biggie. So computer chose scissors, user chose rock, user wins. We now have one user win. We have no computer wins and no draws. Okay, I didn't make a clear button, but let's try paper. Well, I can already see that I've got a problem here that I'll have to fix. All right, I'm not clearing this, so we'll have to do that. We'll do that in just a minute. But now we have what? One user win, one computer win, one draw. It does appear to be working, but it also appears as though there is something that I want to go and clear out that I didn't clear out. All right, so let's do that, and we're done with this iteration. So in this determine winner, first thing I want to do at the top is I want to say the totals dot inner HTML is equal to the empty string, and totals themselves equal the empty string. This is what we're writing out, and this is the text that we're writing out. All right, so let's save that, run it one last time, hopefully. All right. Well, something screwed up. All right. So I immediately go down to inspect here, and I go to console, and it says user choices is not defined. Okay. And it's telling me that it's on line 58. So let's figure out what that is. It's one of the lines I just put in. It has to be, basically. I put user choices there. Okay. I'm not doing this stuff on purpose. I naturally make tons of mistakes when I key stuff in anyway. All right. Not perfect. All right. But you can see exactly now what's happening. All right. And by me going in there and clearing this out every time, all right, it's always coming in and it's got the most up to date scores that are in there. And again, when we went in and we did this, what was new in here is we haven't really been doing a lot of document.get element by ID. I'm kind of surprised in an earlier version of the Muroc text, they used quite a bit of it, and now they're moving more towards having the query selector. Either one works. So everywhere in here that I've got a get element by ID, these could have all been replaced not with the query selector all, but just with query selector. That does the same thing. All right. I've always, when I learned this stuff, it was by watching a lot of YouTube videos. All right. And most of the ones that I looked at, they used get element by ID. All right. But the difference is, again, this is going to find one thing. This is going to find one thing. This is going to find one thing. This is going to find, if there's 10 buttons, it's going to grab all 10 of them. All right. And like I said, iterate over here. So this is basically what we're doing. We're figuring out the user's choice there. Then we're going to figure out the computer's choice. Then we'll determine the winner. And I think I said this before, but again, probably if I had any qualm to make about the way this thing is written in here, it's pretty long for just one routine. So where after we've got determine winner here, as an example, we could have done something like this. All right. Call like update total. Whoops. Totals. Okay. Hopefully I'm not going to screw it up now, but I'm not worried if I do anyway. So I'm going to come in here and was it, I think it was update totals. All right. Now what I've done at least is I have cut down the size of my determined winner. And really, that's what this is doing. So again, what am I doing? This is kind of like my main, for lack of better words, right here. In other words, it's doing a little bit of work, but based more than anything else, it's doing this. All right. It's acting as a driver. So I've got the computer chose, and that's that. Then I've got the determined winner, and that's there. And then I've got the update totals, and that's there. Now that I look at this, I better grab these two lines here and put those down into my determined totals. Otherwise, I know it's not going to work. But let's see if I broke anything or if it works. And it appears to still be functioning just fine. All right. So that's the first one. Okay. I'm going to write two more of these. And like I said, I am not trying to waste anybody's time. What I'm trying to do is to show you that when you're given a problem, there's always a multiple number of ways of solving that problem. All right. So we're going to go to two more when we get back from the break that we're going to take in just a moment. But after we do, then we're going to actually start talking about React. All right. So I've got 906, I guess. Let's come back, please, at 916, and we'll pick it up right there. All right, it is 9:16, so I'm going to start back up again. Now, this wasn't a bad program. I brought it up in a different editor, but about 95 lines of code. It's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. All right, but let's see if we can improve upon it in that what we want to do here, that was nice, is we want to make this, for lack of better words, we want to make this a little bit smaller. All right, we want to make this run a little bit better. When I say run a little bit better, I just mean that it's going to be a little bit smaller. All right. So we'll start the way we've always been starting. That is like this. I'm going to change this and I'm going to make it rock, paper, scissors V2. All right. And I'm going to cut the body down in here. In fact, I'm only going to make it 3 lines long. I'm going to put a div in here with an ID of game. And that'll be basically where we have the game, for lack of better words. All right. I'm going to put another div in here and I'm going to give it an ID of totals. And that's where we're going to put the final totals. And then finally, I'm going to have my script line. I think this is RPS2. Oops, RPS2.js. And that's it. Now that's kind of nice, and that should have been source, not SCR, SRC. All right. That's kind of nice in that our body's only 3 lines long. So if we do have any kind of problem, all right, it shouldn't be very hard to take and to have to go in and edit that or make changes to it or whatever. All right. So let me do a file, save all for right now. Let me close this and let's go into the rock, paper, scissors 2 file. So again, the idea is we want to cut this thing down. Plus, we're going to do it in a little bit different way. All right. Now, our user choice from the last program, our computer choice from the last program, our result from the last program, those were all put into H2 tags. I'm not asking you that. I'm telling you that. All right. I could bring it back up here and show it to you if you really, oh, Jeffrey, get rid of that. No. If you really wanted to see it, all right, we could bring it back up here. All right. It's in the HTML, of course. All right. But when you look, H2, 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 all right, who cares? Well, I'm telling you, not that you care necessarily, but I can create those in JavaScript as well. So I'm going to come in here and say const, just like we did before, the user choice. All right. But before we had it and we created it right inside of the HTML. But now I'm going to say document dot create element H2. And I'm going to do the same thing for the computer choice. And for the result. And again, this was not meant to be a gee whiz or a golly type of moment, but just to show you again, there are a lot of ways that you can do this. In fact, well, that's the game. The game is the user choice, the computer choice, and the result. So I'm going to make another constant here that I'm going to call the game. And we'll call it game grid. Okay. We'll set that equal to document dot. This will be a get element by ID, and that's going to be equal to game. So what is that? That is this right there. All right. So again, what we're going to do next is we're going to say game grid dot append, and we're going to stick all those things in there. The user choice, the computer choice, and the result. All right. Again, just another way to build this stuff. All right. Now I'm going to say let the totals, and that's going to be equal to a document.getElementById. And that's going to be totals. Why does that matter? Because this right here, the totals, that is this. All right, so we've got everything pretty much accounted for right now. Most of the rest of the stuff is what you saw in the last program, and that is, I'm going to say let user wins equals 0, let computer wins equals 0, and let draws equal 0. Plus, I'm going to have this let totals, and that's where we're going to print everything out. But we've already cut down the number of variables that we had. All right, I'm going to make a couple more, but the next one that I'm going to make, I could have put it up here. Some people like to do that and put all their constants together, so I'll do that. But I'm going to make a const, and I'm going to call it choices. And it's going to be set equal to an array. And that array is going to have 3 things in it: rock, paper, and scissors. All right. So now I'm sticking basically my computer choices in there. And of course, we're going to have a user choice. And we're going to have, I'll fix that in a minute, another one called computer choice. All right, we'll fix both those. I'm getting the error because they've already been defined. Oops. So user choice and computer choice. All right, so those are all of our errors. Okay, now, just like we did before, the first thing we want to do basically is we want to come in and be able to iterate over the buttons to get the computer choice. Very similar to what we did before. So I'm going to say here const handle click. I can spell equal, and very similar to what we did before. We're going to use the event. And you'll notice whenever I can here, what I have been doing is using the arrow functions. Again, just to get you all used to using those, because whether you're taking the AWD1111 database-driven website development class this summer or next fall, you'll be using, most of your work will be done using arrow functions. All right. So again, very similar to what we did before. The user choice is equal to e dot target dot ID. Don't know why it's doing that, but it is. Oh my goodness. All right. So what I'm doing in here, what I am doing in here is I am, after I run this, I'll have a user choice. Okay, based on what button I clicked. All right. Then generate computer choice, get result, and display totals. Now, I didn't try this before, but it's always a good thing to do. And that is, I'm going to take these 3 lines for right now and comment each one of them out. All right, then I'm going to save this, go back and run it. Oh, I didn't tell it to display the board yet, so forget it. I was going to show you what we've done so far, but we haven't told it to display that board yet, so it's not going to do anything. All right, so this handle click is going to basically get the computer choice. All right, then next, I'm sorry, get the user choice. So this is going to get the user choice, not the computer choice. All right, now we're going to do this and generate the computer choice. Mm. Oops. And I do want to mention there are a multiple number of ways that this could be written. I could have said here, function, generate computer choice, paren, then put my curly brace. All right. Just as well as doing it this way. Or we could have said const generate computer choice equal function right here. Then we could have gotten rid of this. So there's so many different ways of doing the same thing. All right. And which one is the best? The one that makes the most sense to you is the one that's the best. This is just here. What I'm showing you is just another way of creating the random number with what we're calling random choice here. So that's going to give us a number from 1 to 3. Like I said, there's just so many different ways of doing all this stuff. So that's going to be the computer choice. So I could have said computer choice equal random choice. Technically, couldn't I have saved the line of code here? Couldn't I have just said right here, computer choice equals that, and then gotten rid of this line? I would think so. Anywhere we can save a little bit of code here. So the computer choice dot inner HTML is going to be equal to, like we did up here, but we don't want to say user choice. Now we want to say computer choice. All right. Two more things that we have to do in here. Right now, we've accounted for the user choice. We've accounted for the computer choice. All right. But one thing that we haven't done in here is we haven't gone through and actually generated the buttons. All right. That would be kind of a good thing to do. All right. Would be to go in there and generate that. So there's different ways we can do that. But let's do this. Let's use an old fashioned for loop. So I'm going to tell it right here to create 3 buttons. This, if you remember for choices, what did it say? It said that was the array that said rock, that said papers, paper, and scissors. So we're filling in the names from there, just to show you another way of doing it. Now I think in just a second, I'm going to be able to run this. It's not done. I still have to get the result and display the totals. But the point is this is running through, and basically it's going to go and it's going to add the 3 buttons to our game grid. When I run this the first time, I think all that's going to show are the 3 buttons because I haven't played the game yet. All right, so let's see if indeed that's the case or if I have any errors or anything else in here. Okay, so there's my buttons. Okay, that's working so far. That's good. All right, it's giving me a user choice, and that's whatever I click here. So if I keep clicking rock, notice I keep getting rock, and it's changing my computer choice. That's good. All right. So what's left? Well, what's left is to determine who won. All right. And after we determine who won, which we call get result, then we have to display our running totals. So let's do a get result. All right. Now, you may have already thought of this. You may have already thought of this, but what we did here before was a bunch of if statements, which is totally fine to do. All right. And I even mentioned how you could combine those if statements into one, just 2 or 3 big ifs. And you might say, well, wow, could we also do this if we wanted to? Could we do this as a switch? And the answer is yes. But what we're going to switch on is something a little different. All right, we're going to switch on the user choice plus the computer choice. So in other words, if both of them chose scissors, that would be scissors, scissors. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to write my switch and I'm going to say case, rock, rock, case, paper, paper, case, scissors, scissors. So if any one of those happen, well, what do we know? Well, we know that the result dot inner HTML equal, equal draw. And we want to add 1 to our draws. All right. Hopefully you can wrap your head around that and it makes at least a little bit of sense to you. Finally, we want to break out of that. Oops. All right. And then we're going to do our next 3. So that's the case in which they both chose the same thing. So it's a draw. Now we could actually test it now, but we'd have to keep playing until we got a draw. All right. Let's put the other ones in here. So I'm going to say case. Well, let's do the users next. So we can do this in any order we want, but I'll put in scissors, paper, case, rock, scissors, and case, paper, rock. So I know if it's any one of those 3, well, the result dot inner HTML equal user wins. And we want to, excuse me, we want to add 1 to our user wins, and we want to break. Okay, so that's the 3 cases in which the user can win. Finally, let's do our last 3 cases. So we've got a case, paper, scissors, a case, scissors, rock, and a case, rock, paper. And if it's any of those 3, we know that the computer won. And I'm not even going to put in a default here because it shouldn't be possible. I could, but like I said, it should not be possible. All right. So finally, so we've now come in and we did the get results. So we've got display totals. And it'll be very similar to what we did in the last one. But I'm going to make sure we always start with a clean slate. These are our final totals that are down at the bottom. Put each one on a new line. So again, depending on how quirky you are with this, we could do this. Just makes it a little easier to see what's going with what, but of course we wouldn't have to. All right. And then finally, I just used inner text here rather than inner HTML. What's the difference? Inner text, we don't really have anything we're doing with bolding or whatever. Inner HTML would throw away the the HTML tags, but since I don't have any, just to show you another way we could do it would be to say inner text. So we cut it down from 95 lines to 70. Let's see if it works or if I made any mistakes. All right, well, I should have maybe put a little line break there, but that's okay. All right, and again, we could bold this. There's a lot of things we could do here. All right. Oh, I'm losing my thing that says who won. So I've got to look at that. And it is also not adding these up. All right, let's take a look. All right, let's just take it from the top then. Make sure I didn't miss anything, which with me is always possible. So shouldn't be any problem in here. Oh, looks okay to me. Ooh, that'll look fine. The game, that looks good. Scissors. And user choice, the computer choice. So, damn, the totals. Computer wins, draws, totals. User choice, computer. That all looks fine. That looks fine. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna put this like I did before. I don't, that shouldn't matter, but I'm gonna put this back because that's how I did it originally with random in there. And then I said computer choice equals random choice. It appeared to work okay anyway, but that's how I did it originally. So, okay, that looks okay. I spelled that the same. That's good. Okay. Looks okay. Hmm. I don't see anything that looks wrong on this, but there's a couple things that aren't happening. So let's go back and see if we can debug and figure out what they are. Now it's even got less than it did before. Now it's not showing any of the. It's got the user stuff. Huh. Well, let's try this just so I see something. I'm going to put an alert here, and it's going to just say totals. I want to see if the totals are being calculated correctly. Right? Okay, well, there's a problem. It's not getting to that line. Since it's not getting to this line right here, all right, there's got to be a mistake. It's never getting to display totals. All right. Is it giving me any errors? All right, random choice is not defined in line 26. Oh, there we go. That's why I'm getting an error because I called it random here and not random choice. All right, let's just do this. Let's call it rand. All right, now let's look at it. Okay, all right. I can get rid of the alert now. All right, so let me get rid of the alert. I also want to take where I'm putting in here the user wins. I want to put a backslash in there. In fact, a couple of them. All right. And one thing I could do, I don't have to do this. All right. But it maybe would look a little nicer is, oops, I could get out of there. I could come into my CSS here and I could add a new file. And I think that was a div. Let's check. Was that a div? Yes. All right. And then come back into here. Means I have to add another line in here, but it's no biggie. Okay, and I could change the font size in here, or even better, what did I do? Those were IDs, divs. Okay. Uh, I can also make the font size bigger. So size, how about 1.5 rem? Didn't really have to make this one bigger, but I did anyway. So the point is, you're seeing that this is a second way of doing it, and we actually cut down about 25 lines worth of code. But again, as I mentioned to you earlier, and I want to say this again, and that is the bad thing, so to speak, about all of these methods that I'm showing you is every one of them is using the DOM. All right. So, I mean, with this, it's no biggie. You're not noticing any, you're getting a result, etc. right away. It's no big thing. All right. But if we were doing something where this was more real time intensive, we were constantly redrawing the screen because look at this. The only thing technically it doesn't have to redraw every time are these buttons. All right. Everything else has got to be redrawn because this can change, this probably will change, this will change, this will change, and this will change. All right. So let's write one more iteration of this. Okay. And then we're just going to jump right into React. Just close it. All right. Let's see. Got our index. And let's bring this out there as well. All right. Do it the same way we've been doing it in that I'm going to come in here and do this. All right. This will be rock, paper, scissors version 3. And this will be small again too. And our script tag. Okay. So again, that is our entire HTML. And we're going to write this one more time. And when we do, in many ways, this is kind of meant to be a hybrid of the other two. All right. And it's still going to be about the same number of lines, might even be a couple less. Let's see. All right. So let me open this up. This time I used query selector. Why? Just because I can, I guess. Just like you did before, we'll set this up as an array. You'll notice when you look at it, this is the reason I did this one like this, that when you use the query selector, you need to put in the pound sign. When you use the get element by ID, you don't put in the pound sign. All right. And it's not a big thing. However, it's one where a lot of people screw up on. So I think I'm going to put this over 2 lines, make it easier to read. Right. So when you take a look in here, handle click, we're going to be able to handle both. All right. Basically, both in here, the user and the computer. The user is the e.target.inner HTML. All right. And the computer is the choices math.floor, math.random times choices.length. All right. Now we still have to come in here and add our buttons because we haven't accounted for those. Very similar to what we did in one of the earlier iterations of this. Right? So we've got to get our results and we have to display our total. All right. And just to save a little bit of time, because I don't want to waste your time watching you or you watching me type in the same thing we did before. So I'm going to come in here and say this const um, because this is the same one that we had before, pretty much the same switch statement. So let me grab that from over here. Okay, and then all that's left is to display our totals. Right? I think that's it, but let's see if I missed anything. And now you'll notice we've got it under 60 lines. So from what we had previously, we knocked off basically close to a third of it. We knocked off 27 lines or so from what we had in the first iteration. And I could have missed something here. I hope I didn't, but we'll see. All right, well, something's goofy. It's telling us the winner, but it's not showing us the rest of it. It's no biggie. We'll figure that out in just a second. All right. So we go back and double check these, and then we will start to get into React. Okay. Fine. Don't think I'm even using this where I said user chose and computer chose, but we'll look at that in a minute. I don't think I'm using these things. That's because I went and copied the other one in. So we'll look at that in just a moment. Mhm. All right. That's the problem. Okay, these are incomplete right here. So we did it a little bit differently. So what this should say is the result dot inner HTML equals grab this. Uh, this was a drawing. So let me grab this and copy it 2 more times. All right, in this case, it's not a draw, it's the user wins. And in this case, it's the computer wins. Thought I put it in there. It's not. All right, let me save it. Run it again. That looks better. All right. Let's take a quick look at this, and then we'll jump into the React part, okay? All right. So use the query selector on this one in lines 1 and 2. And again, with the query selector, you do need to put the pound sign in there for your ID because query selector works on multiple things. This is get element by ID, so it knows you're searching for an ID. This is query selector. It could be anything. Could be a paragraph, could be an unordered list, a list item, etc. All right. Then we have our choices array again. And I just did this to try to save a little bit so I didn't have to write user chose every time. So I've got user chose and computer chose. Sometimes you got to use the BR tag if you want a line break. Sometimes you got to use the backslash and it depends on how you're writing it and where you're writing it. All right. So I've got here totals and I've got result and I've got choices. Again, that came from choices, result, and totals. Okay. Our other variables were again our user wins, our computer wins, our draws, the actual final totals themselves, which is where we're going to store that, and then all the game stuff. Again, this is the handle click. It's very similar to what we did before, except that, as I mentioned previously, it's handling both of them. It's handling both the user and the computers, okay? And then it is displaying the totals. But before it does that, it goes and it runs this code, which creates our 3 buttons. You may or may not have noticed when we first run the program, that's all that shows on the screen. Again, because we haven't played a game yet. All right. Then to get the results, I used basically the same thing that we used in the last one. All right. The only thing is now I have to go and add all the stuff manually. So the user choice plus the computer choice. Previously, we had added that stuff. But again, we're doing this in a way that is more generic in nature by doing this and having this account for both of them, both the user and the computer. All right. So this is the same exact case that we had last time, except we're writing more out here and here and here. All right. And then I just called it all games. I got bored of it. Well, Sorry. All right. So you've now got 3 working versions of this. Okay. So especially those of you who went and on your test, if you had problems with this, then you can use one of these. All right. Now, this I'm telling you this. This is my personal opinion. It may be worth nothing, but I would use for one of the things that you're going to put out on your electronic portfolio. I mean, some of you created an interface that was a heck of a lot better than mine was. All right. I'm not going to mention names, and some of you, they weren't that good. All right. But you might want to go back and fix that up. Again, if you're trying to get a job, you want to impress the people that you're trying to um, show that they should hire you. So you wouldn't want to put something out there that didn't work. So now you should have working copies. All right. Okay, let me save that. And I'm just going to quit this. Now, the next thing that I want to do, and we are going to take a break fairly quickly, but next thing I want to do is I'm going to go out to W3 schools. And amongst their other things, when we go down to tutorials, there is one in here that's someplace. There it is, Learn React. All right. So let me go till 10:15 because that's about when we took our break last time. All right. And then we'll take a break and then we'll come back. And I'm not going to talk real long after that. We'll be done probably around 10:45 or so. Okay. Now, notice this React is JavaScript. All right. So, much of the stuff that you're going to be doing in here, you will be using the same JavaScript we've been using all along. All right. Now, React is used to build what are typically referred to as SPAs, a single page application. And it's not so much where it's something that where you just keep going and doing this and seeing more and seeing more and seeing more, etc. All right. But it'll be where it'll go and it'll rerun, or when it runs, it'll basically replace what has been there previously. The key thing is that third thing that you see right there. React allows us to create reusable components. Now, if I take my screen that's right here, I'm going to make this smaller on purpose, okay? And I say to you, how many components are on this page? I'd have to count, but if you told me there's 20, I'd believe you. In other words, each one of these things in here is a component. That's a component. This in here is a component. It's got a couple button components on it. This thing coming down here is a component, etc. So what allows you to do is to take a project and, for lack of better words, chunk it, CHUNK, build it into chunks. All right. Now I'm going to show you a couple things before we take the break, and they're not going to make much sense at all. In fact, they're not going to even make a lot of sense tomorrow because there's 2 ways that you can write React, and I'm going to show you both of them. All right. And the stuff we go through tomorrow, the first thing we're going to do, believe it or not, is we're going to look at one more JavaScript example, which we're going to end up rewriting in pure React in just a bit. All right. But when we take a look on here, okay, in order for React to do its thing, all right, there are things that you have to bring into it. So if you look at that example there, it says import React from React, and then import React DOM from React/DOM dot or dash client. Especially that first one, import React from React, is something that you're going to bring into almost every React program that you do, because virtually everything that you end up doing will be React dot something. And by putting in the import React from React rather, you don't have to say React dot. You can just use it. And you might say, is that a big thing? It's really not, but it just makes things a little bit easier when you start working with it. All right. Now, a couple of other things that are in here. You're not even probably going to remember this, but I just want to say it to you. All right. What you're going to notice when we look in and we start building React in quote the React way, all right, is basically in your whole body what you see right here in blue. All right, const container equal document dot get element by ID root. Believe it or not, you can write a very complex React program, and that's the only thing that you need to put into the body of your HTML file. That one line. All right. Because what typically happens, and you don't have to call it root, but by convention, everybody does. All right. What that's going to do is it's going to draw on the screen or whatever you want to say, however you want to create, say it. All right. It's going to paint your screen and it's all going to be in that div. All right. That's going to be called root. All right. And again, I don't care if you remember that or expect you to remember it. I just wanted to tell that to you. Now, W3 Schools does have a thing where you can, I think it's 95 bucks, and they have a whole course that you can take and get React certified. All right. I'm not recommending that you do that. I'm just telling you that they have that. There are plenty of things online that you can do for free where you don't have to worry about doing stuff like that. But I mean, would it help you to get a job? I don't know. I'm sure it wouldn't hurt. Let's put it that way. But I'm never saying, hey, if you want a job, you better go out and spend 95 bucks. No, not at all. All right. I want to mention some of the stuff that's in here right now. All right. React was created by Facebook. All right. Again, as you notice right there, it's a tool for building user interface components. That's what we're going to end up doing. All right. Notice how they mention right there, it creates a virtual DOM in memory. I already mentioned that to you. Rather than manipulating the DOM directly, it creates a pseudo or false DOM. That's where it does the manipulating. And the only changes it makes in the DOM then are things that actually have to change. So rather than rewriting everything, all right, it only rewrites what needs to be rewritten. Now, I used to be able to show people a similar example to this that was really cool. All right, but they changed it. I used to have people go out. Yeah, I know most people don't even go out to video stores anymore. But familyvideo.com, oh, we are closed. Okay. All right. I guess that makes sense. But what used to happen when you went out here is they'd have pictures of all their new videos. Okay. And if you take your mouse and you'd put it over one of the pictures, you'd get a little bubble that would come out that would give you a description of the movie. And then when you'd move off of it, that little bubble would go away. And you could do that to every movie that was on there. And you might be like, well, who cares? Well, it's that actually is a concept that's known as Ajax. And one of the chapters in your book that we didn't go over, I think it was like 16 or 17, I don't remember, 18, I don't know, was on Ajax. And Ajax stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. All right. And it's a way that you can do a partial page rewrite. If you don't know what I mean, what we're saying is, for example, let's say that you made some changes on here, and the only thing that you wanted to change was, oh, we forgot to add something in here. Let's say originally we forgot to add this. Well, let's just grab this one, Highland Pure Water and Ice. So you'd make the change, you'd bring it back up again. None of this would be rewritten, but this would be rewritten down here to move stuff over and make room for this. And it may not sound like a big thing, but by using Ajax with websites, all right, you can make things come up on the screen much faster. Now, I already mentioned Ajax is an acronym that stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. The funny thing is, most people don't ever say that anymore. They just say Ajax. But XML is still used, but not used that much anymore. Rather, what's used with this is JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, which we talked a little bit about, but not too much. All right. As it says, React finds out what changes have been made and changes only what needs to be changed. All right. The current version, and this is updated all the time, just so you know, just like Node is. Okay. You do need Node.js in order to be able to run this. Right. Okay. Getting started, there are different ways of doing this. I'm not going to go over this right now, but I'll quickly tell you 3 ways we can do this. Notice what they've done in here. They're bringing React in directly in here. Don't worry if you don't know what the stuff in there means. It doesn't matter for right now. We're not going to do it this way. All right. Another way that you can do this, you may have seen this before, you may not have. I'm going to go out to codepen.io and hit enter. We may have talked about this before. All right. And you may say, well, what is this? I'm just going to click this button that says start coding. Okay. And I'm going to come in here and right away, I'm just going to come in and I'm going to type in this. I'm going to put in an H1 that says hello world. And you can immediately see when you look right there, there's my output. There's my hello world. Then I can come in and I can say, for example, I can go into my CSS here and I can say, you know what? I want all H1s to be green. And you can see what happens right away. Then I can go into the JavaScript that's right over here. I don't know why it's not letting me move very well. And I can do an alert that says, hello. All right. And you'll notice immediately there it is. But the point is, I can now go in and I can write as much stuff in here using as much or as little HTML as I want, as much or as little CSS as I want, and as much or as little JavaScript that I want. Now, if I don't care, if I don't want this to be green, I can remove that. It'll go back to black in a second. And I can take this whole window here and basically just get rid of it. If all I'm putting in here is just this H1, I can do the same thing here. All right, so let me grab that, move it over and grab that. What's the advantage of doing that? Now I've got a big work area that I can use for my JavaScript. All right, now what we're doing right here is free. I want to say this, what we're doing right here is free. However, this is called a code pen. That's what it is. If you want to save a pen, I believe you have to sign up. All right. And it says there, you'll have to log in to sign up for free to save your pen. All right. You'll notice I already have. Once you do that, and I'm just going to log in with this. All right. Then what you'll notice is you get a bunch of junk in there. You get basically the equivalent of some like some login information that's in there. This, when we go tomorrow, we're going to do a couple things. All right. The first thing is I'm going to show you 2 very quick examples of how to use that Ajax that I mentioned before. Why? Because I want you to see them. I don't think we went over these examples previously, so we're going to do that. All right. Then we're going to go in and kind of a thing that people do when they want to learn a new language is one of the things that's recommended is you create a simple to-do list. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to create a to-do list with just using JavaScript. Then when we get done with that, we're going to start to retrofit over into the world of React and create this same thing in React. but we're going to do it in a code pen. All right. Then we're going to go and make a big React project that's going to do a to-do list for us. And you're welcome to save as much of that stuff. You're welcome to use it. So in other words, if tomorrow when I go through a couple of Ajax examples, if you want to go in and you decide you want to add those Ajax examples to your test that we just worked on, or make another website where you've got Ajax examples and where you've got like a to-do list, a couple of, go ahead and do that. And if you don't, then don't. All right. But the other thing that I want to mention about this, and I know it sounds like I'm sounding a little flitty here, but the next thing here is React ES6. Now, when you look at this, why should I learn ES6? All right. What the authors of this particular tutorial are saying is, in order for you to become decent, whatever word you want to use, in React, you should understand these 8 JavaScript concepts. Now, if you look right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are links. So if I click the link, it's going to bring me there. If I click that link, it's going to bring me there. Some of this stuff we have talked about already. Some of it we have not. So what I'd like to do, and I know I said I was going to give you a break, I'm just going to go for about 10 or 15 more minutes and we'll be done. All right. But I'd like to quickly go over those and then we'll call it a period. All right. So some of this stuff you've already heard of. For instance, I'm not going to do these in order. You know what the ternary operator is. That's that question mark colon operator. And there's a lot of ways that it can be used. They show you it in a way that's different than what I showed you, but it's no big thing. All right. You may or may not remember, but I showed you it more or less in the concepts where when we came in here and I said like int num1 equals 71, int num2 equals 114, int max, and then we'd say if num1 is greater than or equal to num2, max equals num1, else max equals num2. And I said that could be replaced with just max equals num1 greater than or equal to num2, question mark, num1, colon, num2. So you can replace this, and you don't even need the curly braces here because there's only one line. But when you look, we've replaced 8 lines of code with 1 line. Now, the examples that they show are a little different because what they're saying there is this is the equivalent of saying if authenticated equal true. So if the person has been authenticated, render it. Otherwise, bring them to a page where they'd have to log in. And then they just rewrite it like this. So the idea is the same. And what you're trying to do is the same. All right. They just have a little more complex example than what I showed. There's one of the 8. Next, variables. All right. Now, var is still out there. There is still millions of lines of code that have var in there. Var is something you should not use because it leads to bad programming practices. All right. So I'm not even going to talk about it any more than that. That's enough said. You can read that if you want to. All right. But let has what's called block scope. So if you use let and you create something within a function then it only lives within that function. All right. It only lives within that function unless you pass it someplace else. And const is set up for constants. It's a variable that once it's created, the value should not change. Notice though, let has block scope. What the heck does that mean? That means whatever curly braces you have defined it within, it's known there and only there. So if I've got let inside of a function and that function is within curly braces, then the scope of that let variable is between those curly braces. All right. If I write a for loop and I say for let, I don't know, let LCV equal 0, you know, and semicolon plus LCV, and then I put in curly braces, then that LCV variable with a let is only known inside of that for loop. So it's between the curly braces. And that's whether you use let or whether you use const. If you are going to be working with a variable that's a set it and forget it, you should use const whenever you can, because const renders faster. And they also mention here that const is a bit misleading. It does not define a constant value. It defines a constant's reference to a value. What the heck does that mean? All right. That means that if you set a value equal to something, all right, then what happens is someplace in memory, that value is put in there. The way the computer remembers where that is it uses the memory address. And that's the constant reference. So that memory address doesn't change. Now, it says you cannot reassign a constant value. That actually isn't true. All right. If it's a simple variable, all right, then you cannot change it. But if it's an array, you cannot change the size of the array, but you can change the constant, the contents of a const array. All right. About it for those. Next, we spent a chapter talking about some of the array methods. Now, here's one we did not talk much about, but I showed it to you. And you might look at that and go, well, geez, who cares? Well, let's just look at the example here. All right. Notice it's React, but it looks very similar to stuff we've been doing. So we're creating an array, a constant array with 3 values in it. Then we're saying we want to iterate over that and put each one of those values into its own paragraph. So it's taking that array and breaking it up. Is there another way we could do that? Of course there is. All right. In fact, just looking here, I'm gonna try this. I don't know if it'll work. I'm gonna just, oops. See, can I come in here? Come on. Does it let me change this stuff? No, it doesn't. All right. Usually when they have their try this, they let you come in and make changes to what's in here. But for whatever reason, they don't want us to change this. We could have done this in a for loop as well. The point though is this. In the article that I gave you earlier or late last week, mid last week, talked about some of the most used array methods. One of them is map. And what map does is it allows you to iterate through an array and do something special to every element that's in there. All right. If you say that doesn't make sense, well, I mean, that's the best I can tell you right now. All right. So what else is in here? This one is neat. In fact, let's go to spread next, and we'll go to destructuring. There's the spread operator. Dot, dot, dot. It's a shortcut for using an entire array or a part of an array when you're doing things like copying. So when you look right here, they've got an array called numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, another one called numbers 2, 4, 5, 6. And they're saying to combine them, you could say dot, 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 numbers 1, comma, dot, 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 numbers 2. That means grab everything that's in numbers 1, combine to it everything that's in numbers 2. So that's creating a new array with everything in it. Now, looking at that or looking at the example, that may not, who cares? But again, what if there were 1,000 elements in here and 1,000 elements in here? Now you'd have 2,000 things there and you wouldn't have to change anything. All right. Now that's the spread operator. There's another operator that looks very similar to it that's called the rest operator that they don't mention in here. All right. But they do mention, if you look, it says spread is often used with destructuring. So let's look at that one next. Okay. You can look at destructuring as kind of the opposite of a join statement. In other words, what we want to do when we destructure this is rather than make it one variable, we want to make it into 3 different variables. Remember with JavaScript, even though this is a string array that you see in blue, not all array elements have to be the same type of data. All right. I'm going to say that again. Not all array elements must be the same type of data. So if we want to take an array and break it up into pieces, or maybe we don't need all the pieces in there. Maybe we only need 1 or 2. So as they say, this is the way you used to do it. Const car equal vehicle 0, which would put Mustang in there. Const truck equal vehicles 1, which would put F-150 in there. And const SUV equals vehicles 2, which would give you expedition. But now doing it like this, it's a little bit easier. All right. It's a little less code. And they even mention that if you notice they've got comma, comma here. So that's going to skip the F-150, so the truck won't be in there. You only have car and SUV. And as they mentioned, this can come in very handy. This may be the most important part of today's class, right here, this example. All right. Why? Because what using destructuring allows you to do is return multiple things from a function. By default, you can only return one thing from a function. All right. Well, technically, we are only returning one thing, but we're returning it as an array. So what we could do is, if we built a calculator like this, and if what we did when we did this was rather than having separate functions, one for add, one for subtract, one for multiply, one for divide, we can put it all together. Now, is that a good thing to do? Hey, but the point is, notice with the example they've got here with calculate 4, 7, it should add the 2, and add should give you 11, subtract, so subtract should give you -3, multiply, which should give you 28, and divide, I don't know what 4 divided by 7 is, like 0.57 or something like that. And when you look at it, there it is. So the sum, the difference, the product, and the quotient. That is really, really big stuff. Not only that, again, those of you, eventually all of you will take the AWD 1111 class, and you will do your share of restructuring. All right. So next, arrow functions, which we were looking at today. So what they're saying is there's hello written as a non-arrow function, and there's hello written as a function. You're saving a little bit of typing, not really a lot. You'll see both of those used. Some people like using the word function, some don't. But either way, the key takeaway from these two examples here is hello world. All right, that string hello world, now since it's being returned, hello itself holds the value hello world. Now, one thing I mentioned to you earlier when we started on our JavaScript journey, all right, is one thing that differentiates JavaScript from most other programming languages, not every other or every one, but from most programming languages, all right, is that JavaScript allows you to use a function like a variable. So you can assign the results from a function return to a variable. All right. So again, they have more examples in here than what I've shown you. There are certain rules. Okay. If you have only one parameter like this, you don't need the parentheses. All right. On something like this, if you're just have a single statement in here with a return, you don't need the word return. You don't even need the curly braces. So you can take this and convert it into this. There's a lot of ways this stuff can be written. I would be willing to bet you that the way that I do it and the way that Mr. Gudniston does it probably wouldn't even be the same thing. All right. We're writing the same stuff, but the syntax we use most of the time probably would be different. All right. Couple more. All right. Classes. We skipped that chapter on classes. Okay. Next semester, probably a good third of the class, those of you who take the AWD1000 class, the C# programming class, will be spent on how to create classes. JavaScript is very unique. They've got a way that they used to create classes, all right, that were called prototypes. You can still use them. They've got another way that's more simpler or more close to what you see on the example here, and that's the way you create classes in most other languages. You can do some combining of the two, and JavaScript is so cool in so many ways in that one of the things it lets you do is to grab an existing class, not yours, but something that JavaScript has written. You can grab that class and then add your own stuff to it and make it a new updated class. All right. And it's one of the few languages, again, that I know of that allow you to do that. All right. And the only one I didn't talk about, I believe, in here was modules. So let's talk about those. As it says, JavaScript modules allow you to break up your code into separate files. What you end up doing when you break your code up into several files is you'll find that some of the code that you write, you'll be able to use in more than one application. So what you start to do with that is you begin to go in and build your own library. What they call modules typically are going to be functions. All right, but they're things that you'd use typically on an off times basis. Now it says there that modules rely on import and export statements. What you typically do with a module is usually you can do it at the beginning, but normally you do it at the end, is that you export multiple things. All right, either separately or like this. So that's exporting. What that's saying is anybody who imports this now has access to those variables. So import and export work together. You export your modules or whatever from your module you want other people to use, or the other person could be you as well. And then you or other people import those back in. And again, I'm not saying that makes a lot of sense. I've been jumping through these quickly because I said I'm going to get you out of here in 3 minutes. But there's examples of all this stuff. So what I would like you to do, we're going to hit on most of the stuff that you see in here. All right, we're going to look at most of it in here in the next few days. And if there's time, we will talk about hooks. We'll talk about use state and use effect at least. And there's exercises in here, etc. So what I would like you to do, all right, is just go in. If what I went over in here didn't make a lot of sense, just start from the beginning. Spend a half an hour and go through the stuff that's in here. All right. With the React ES6, again, as it says, those 8 things are what are recommended that you learn before you basically go from straight JavaScript to React. They're saying these are probably the most important JavaScript oriented concepts that you should understand before you work your way over to React. All right. So last thing, again, today we went over just straight JavaScript examples. Tomorrow I'm going to start by going over a couple, and I'll do them quickly. All right. And there's 2 reasons that I want to go over those 2 Ajax examples that I mentioned to you. Number 1 is it'll show you what Ajax is. And number 2, for the first time, it'll show you what an API is. We're going to go out, we're going to get information from the internet and be able to use it directly in our JavaScript program. After we get done with that, we are going to go in and we are going to write 2 versions of a to-do list. It'll be very simple. Again, I didn't pretty it up. All right. So it won't look pretty. All right. But it'll be functional. And then we will eventually take that and convert that into React. All right. So, Grant, unless you have any questions on anything, that's what I had for today.
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Well, like I said, it got us started. I didn't want to jump into it too fast. So hopefully at least most of it made sense. All right. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.